So we're gonna pick up where we left off last time. The goal of today's video is going to be to route the HTTP requests to different controllers and controller methods. So the way we're going to accomplish this is by starting to write the code in the Bootstrap file. So first off, we want to invoke a class or an instance of a class in this file. So I'm going to start by writing new app. Obviously this file doesn't exist, there's no such class, so it should not run yet. So let's start writing this class. We'll make a new folder, the app folder, inside which we are going to add a subfolder, core folder, which is going to contain the core functionality for the application. These are going to be the functions, the classes we're not going to modify when we customize the application for this is just the stuff which is part of the structure basically. Let's make a new file and let's save it as app.php, and now let's write the class app. So class app, and in this class we're going to have a few attributes. So the first one being controller, method, and params, the parameters. We're going to set default values for these. So the first one I'm going to set to home controller. For the method, index, and for the params, just an empty array. Great. So now let's build a constructor. So in this constructor, the goal is going to be to invoke a method to parse the URL that's incoming. We want to invoke this and store this parsed result in a variable which we will use later. For the time being, we will just view the contents of this URL. And now let's write this parse URL method. So the method takes no parameter. It's only going to use the get array. We use this super global array, and we are going to verify if, first of all, the get element for URL is set. So if is set get URL, then we will process this get URL element. The way we will process this element is by returning the result of explode. And we want to explode based on the / delimiter a string, which is going to be the result of filtering basically our variable. So for the time being, let's just write $_get URL. And the way we are going to filter this is going to be filter I think filter validate URL is correct. And now the next part is going to be to basically remove any leading slash. By using the rtrim method on get URL. And what we're going to remove is, as I mentioned previously, the any leading slash. So it's sanitize, filter sanitize URL. Great. So now that we've done this, we can view the result of our program running by looking at the contents of what is returned from the parse URL method. Now I'm telling you right away, this is not going to work because we have not included the file. So let's see what a program crashing looks like. There we go. We have that the class app is not found. We need to require the file which contains the definition. So require once, and we're going to get it from app/core/app.php. Save this. Now that it is required, we can run, and we get that we have an array that contains the word hello. And if we pass now some more stuff, hello Alice, now we have an array which contains two elements, hello and Alice. Great. So there's more to this routing than just parsing the URL. Let's start looking at what needs to be done to map the HTTP request to a controller. So what we want to do is we want to start by validating that the controller does exist. So if file exists, and we're going to look for a file which is going to be the controller definition. So app/controllers/ we will then concatenate with the name of the controller we are passing in, URL 0 controller.php. Great. Now that's going to work as long as URL 0 exists. So if is set URL 0 and the file exists in app controllers URL 0 controller.php. So that's the first check. Then in this case we will run something. The last part we're going to run is going to be to basically unset URL 0. But before we do this, we're actually going to set the controller this. Controller is equal to URL 0. And we'll concatenate controller. I don't like having the word controller in the URLs. However, I do like having all of my controllers named something controller. So this is why I'm using this scheme where I put the word controller.php and controller here for the class name. Now we will instantiate the controller as an object. Great. So for this to actually work, we need to have controllers. So let's add a new folder, call it controllers. Under app, and for the sake of testing this, let's make a new file. The home controller.php file. The class home controller, in which we will simply write a constructor for the sake of testing. Okay, so if this runs normally and we are invoking the home controller or no other file exists, then we should see this controller being called the home controller. Which would work if we had actually included. So require once app slash controllers slash this controller, concatenate with .php. Great, so we require it, then we can instantiate it. Now that makes sense. Let's see what happens. All right, so we have a syntax error on line 12. Let's fix that. The syntax error goes unexpected opening on line 12. There we go. Great, the home controller runs. Now let's actually verify that there is a method of the correct name. So we need to verify if is set URL 1 and method exists this in this controller and the method name URL 1. So if this does exist, then we will write that the method is equal to the contents of URL 1 and onset URL 1. So now we have only parameters left in our URL array. So we will set the params to be equal to, if there is a URL array, basically to the array values from URL, otherwise an empty array. And finally, we call user, we were going to call the function with an array of parameters, and this array of parameters is this params, which we just extracted above. Now we want to specify that we are calling the method from the controller. So we are going to invoke call user func array with this controller, this method, and this params. To validate, it's going to be necessary to change our test function to index. This is going to be the default function. So home controller index method is going to be the output. So we've modified the home controller function that was a constructor to the index so that we get output when we actually call the function. Let's try this. Great, home controller index method. Now hello and Alice were not consumed, so these are probably going to be sent as parameters. We can validate this. By adding two parameters and setting default values. And now we echo the values. Home controller index method, hello Alice. Great. So now what we've seen in this tutorial today is how to complete the routing in our PHP MVC application. Next time, we're going to discuss how to actually write controller methods, and we're going to also expand on the core functionality by writing the controller base class. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day.